Well, back home on the University of Washington campus, an organization is working to bridge the gap between Greek life and the LGBTQIA+ community. Greek life is inherently heteronormative, but it's also evolving as college campuses become more inclusive.
Now, Greek Pride is now connecting queer students within the UW Greek community. KIRO 7's Niku Kazori spoke with the president of the student-run organization on how it all works.
At University of Washington, there's a long history of Greek life. Incoming freshmen are introduced to the long-standing traditions of joining a fraternity or sorority. But for some, finding their safe space within that community can be difficult. That's when the student-run organization Greek Pride steps in to give students a place to find comfort among fellow queer members. UW junior Sean Haney went from attending the first meeting as a freshman to becoming president of Greek Pride 2 years later, an achievement he's proud of. One of his most notable accomplishments, strengthening the relationship between interfraternity and panhellenic councils, providing Greek Pride resources.
They provide us with our funding, and we're also involved in their new member orientation and education projects that happen in the beginning of the year, which I think has been really successful at just introducing the idea of Greek Pride to every incoming new member, and ensuring that everybody who comes into the Greek system knows that this community exists.
Haney says sometimes there could be a negative connotation of gay people among fraternities and sororities, and vice versa. But Greek Pride is here to build a bridge between the two.
There is also a negative image of fraternity and sorority members within the gay community. So a lot of the time when I'm going out in Cap Hill or something, a queer space, I'll tell people that I'm in a fraternity and they'll laugh at me. So, there definitely is a stereotype that exists that these two communities have to be mutually exclusive, and Greek Pride is here to show that they don't.
Haney says Greek Pride is working to change the culture of the Greek system and its traditions to better accommodate queer and non-binary people. That starts with bringing awareness to old traditions like serenades.
The idea exists that you're introducing young men to young women and facilitating future relationships. There's no effort to introduce fraternity men with other fraternity men if they're gay, or the same thing with sorority women and sorority women. So that's the hole that Greek Pride's filling. We can facilitate those connections when we've got all these traditions around you that are not sort of created to help queer people.
Greek Pride coordinates with larger queer groups within UW and volunteer with city food banks and shelters. Haney also wants members and people who are thinking of joining to know they are in a safe space that caters to them and welcomes students from all walks of life. Reporting in Seattle, Niku Kazori, KIRO 7 News.
And to watch more of our Your Voices series, visit KIRO7.com/yourvoices. You can also share your story with us there.